Ronnie C., you are doing so well in the congregation. Don't focus so much on getting married. You will have plenty of time to find a husband in the new system. Why not focus your attention on going to serve where the need is great?
Hey ladies, got a struggle? Need to vent? It's time to join your voice and get down to business with some critical thought, where like-minded ladies share their personal experiences to empower each other using critical thinking to make wise decisions. And now, here's your host, Lady C.
Hi, this is Lady C. Thank you for tuning in to yet another episode of the Critical Thought under the special series, Struggles of Jehovah's Witness Women. And our guest today is going to touch on a very interesting topic, one that a lot of Jehovah's Witness women struggle with in their daily lives, and that is singleness, being single.
All the single ladies, all the single ladies.
And our guest today, Ronnie C., is going to help us to appreciate what that's all about, and I'd like to welcome her to our show. Thank you so much, Ronnie, for being on the show.
Hi, Lady C. Thank you for having me on the show, and I think it's great that you are providing a platform for women so that their voices can be heard.
Absolutely. That is something that we all need to gain strength from and to be able to be together to help each other to get through the maze of life and finding life after Watchtower. Now, like you and I, we touched base with me like 6 months ago, and you were very interested in our show and telling your story. And basically, you want to tell us a little bit about how you became one of Jehovah's Witnesses before we get into your story and what that was all about.
Sure. Just to try to be brief, I wasn't born in the truth, and I wasn't raised in the truth, so to speak. It wasn't until I was in, I would say probably about 10 or 12, my mother used to take studies with Jehovah's Witnesses. So I knew of Jehovah's Witnesses, but I didn't know everything about the truth. And it wasn't until I was about the age of 15 where I actually started to have my own Bible study. And my mother was also studying at that time as well. She did study with a lot of witnesses, and because she didn't progress, so I guess she got labeled as being a non-progressive Bible student, that her Bible studies would just fall off. But from the time that I actually started studying the Bible, and they started me off with the You Can Live Forever in Paradise on Earth book, I stuck with it. So that was about the mid-1990s when I started.
Okay. So did your mother ever get baptized as one of Jehovah's Witnesses?
No, she didn't. But actually, her father used to study with witnesses, and he always told her this is a good religion. So, in the back of her mind, she thought it was a good religion, but she would study, and she wouldn't progress because my mother also smoked, and she celebrated the holidays, and she didn't want to give that up. And she wanted the knowledge, but she didn't want to become a Jehovah's Witness, if that makes any sense. So what the sister that studied with me would always say, well, then that means that the truth is not in your mother's heart because she's just studying for Bible knowledge. And I do remember a point in time when I became an unbaptized publisher and I started going out service, my mother told me this, and it has always stuck with me. She told me that I wanted you to learn about the Bible, but I never wanted you to become a Jehovah's Witness. So at that point, when she said that, I was like, oh, this is coming from Satan. It's just like what I learned in my studies. It's what we learn in the Bible, that you're going to have this opposition. It's going to break up the families. And I believed that wholeheartedly. And so I just kept at it and kept at it and kept at it. And I could see it probably did break my mother's heart that I was doing that I was opposing her. Because to my mother is like, we're your family. My mother told me, she's like, I gave birth to you. You can't tell me you're going to not talk to me. You're not going to come around during the holidays. So, and it did cause there was a time period there where I didn't come by for birthdays. I didn't come by for holidays. And that's at the time when I had moved out.
So basically what we're looking at here with your situation is your grandfather he plants this seed. He says, oh, this is a great religion. Your mother, in trying to listen to what he's saying, she decides, let me go check this out. Let me study the Bible with the witnesses, but not realizing the effect that it would have on her offspring. Because the moment that she brought that religion into the home, it planted the seed in you right then. And then, of course, you did more than she did because you didn't have all those vices that she had.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. And my grandfather, he also smoked as well, and he drank pretty heavily. And I think my mother saw that, he studied the Bible, but he never gave up those things. My grandfather never became a Jehovah's Witness, but it was the similar thing. He had Jehovah's Witnesses come around because I guess he was somebody's return visit. So my mother saw Jehovah's Witnesses coming by. They seemed like nice people. They were always friendly and cordial. And so that's probably what allowed my mother to bring them into the home.
For our listening audience, this is why it is so important that you understand what you're getting into, what you're introducing to your family, because you just never know how it's going to affect people. And it always affects people differently. Like you said, you felt like, based on what they were telling you and your studies, that your mother was like persecuting. Her objection was like Satan's retaliation, right?
Exactly. Because at the time I was studying, that's what I learned, and it fit. Everything fell into place. It was like, okay, this is coming from Satan. And I discussed those issues with my Bible teacher, and she was like, yep, that's coming from Satan. We have to expect it. Basically, she was making me choose. Are you choosing Jehovah or are you choosing Satan? The religion pretty much pits you up against your family and makes you feel like your family is siding with Satan, which I have a major problem with because it did cause a lot of strife within my family between the relationship with me, my mother, and also my father as well.
Now, you mentioned in your correspondence to me that you were baptized, and then at another time in your life, I think it was maybe a 4-year span from the time you got baptized, that you became inactive and you were preparing to leave the organization, but you felt lost and was ill-equipped emotionally to leave. Now, what happened during that time period that made you become inactive? What was going on?
It had a lot to do with my being single and, wanting to pursue other things in life. It wasn't so much higher education because I was able to go to school and obtain my RN license. I got my associates in nursing. So I did all that young. I did all that while I was still studying. But I was already living on my own at this point. My roommate, she had married a brother, and so I decided that I wanted to continue living on my own. At that point, I didn't want to have any roommates. I just wanted to live on my own. I did have some sisters that I hung out with, but it seemed like we all had the same struggle. And we all pretty much did make efforts to try to meet other people, broaden out, and we tried to meet or go places where we thought brothers would be, but I had reached a point where I was just tired and I needed a change.
In your congregation, how many single sisters were there?
At that particular hall, there were not that many. Now, the Kingdom Hall that I recently was attending had a high percentage of single sisters, and we did a lot together. We hung out, we went to movies, we went to dinner, we went to the beach on weekends. We basically supported each other because that was our only support system. And a lot of these sisters had been married before. Some of them came out of the world. Some of them were raised in the truth. But the one thing that we had in common was that we were single. We were of age where we wanted to be married. And we were past the bloom of youth. Some of us were 30 plus. And we wanted to, that's what was lacking in our lives, was to have affection, have the opportunity to have our own families. There was always that thing that binded us together, but it was the one thing that we all wanted to remedy or to make better in our lives. But it's like misery loves company, so we kind of all gravitated towards each other because of that. And that's basically how we continued our day-to-day lives. When, if somebody wanted to go out, it was always a girls' night out. We would always do things together in a group. I did hear of a time where there was a brother that was visiting my hall, and during the meeting, I didn't comment. And the brother that was visiting, he had seen me, and he had interest in me visually. So visually, he found me attractive. But because I didn't comment at the meeting, The sister that he was visiting, he told her, because she was going to introduce us after the meeting, but he later told her no, because I can see that she's not very spiritual because she didn't comment at the meeting. It pretty much shook me up a little bit because I thought to myself, who is this brother or this person to see me and visually like me, but to rate me based on the fact that I didn't comment at a meeting? So in a sense, he was judging me based on spiritual credentials versus, hey, let me get to know this person. Maybe I can actually have a decent conversation with her. Maybe this is somebody that we do share interests, but because I didn't comment at the meeting, it didn't go beyond that.
And that's interesting that you say that because it's like one meeting. It's not like he observes you over a series of meetings. I mean, for all he knew, you could have been having a bad day. But it just goes to show one more thing about how Jehovah's Witnesses, it's all about how you look. You know, the prescription that they say, field service, you know, quit your job, pioneer, whatever you're going to do. Anything that looks like you're doing a lot for Watchtower, it seems like you're supposed to be a great person to marry.
Exactly. Exactly. And I never met the brother, so I don't even know what he looked like if it was somebody that I would take interest in. But it really shook me, so that it led me to believe that all brothers had that mindset when they looked at a sister for marriage. Granted, sisters, too, were told, you know, look for the brother that's reaching out. You want to look for the brother who's, you know, volunteering his time at ClickBuilds, or if he's going to volunteer his time at Bethel or to serve where the need is great. So those are things that, you know, you pretty much get pounded into your head. But when that happened, I guess it caught me off guard. And so then I had the thought that, you know, every brother is looking at me like that. So I have to step up my game. So, you know, I did try to do that. But at the time I was working full time, and, you know, I made my meetings regularly. I was out in service, and I was giving as much as I could without running myself ragged. But as far as that, I mean, a lot of sisters pretty much do their part to try to be seen. When it comes times for assemblies and conventions, we would all go shopping together to get that new outfit that looked really cute on us, and get the perfect shoes, get our nails done, get our hair looking really nice so that we can mingle. And pretty much conventions, I know we were there to receive spiritual information, but truth be told, a lot of witnesses go there to shop and to connect and meet with other single people, especially if they're looking for a mate. They're going to want to look on point. They're going to want to get themselves out there, get themselves be seen, so that if there's another brother who's viewing them from across the way, he can find a way to connect with you. It was almost like it's an event. It's not that we turned it into a singles event, but that was because where I lived, there were not a lot of single brothers that I had, I wouldn't say access to, but that I was able to meet and just to, you know, have friendship with. It was mainly single sisters that hung out together.
What were some of the statements that the brothers would make to the single sisters in your congregation that you were getting tired of hearing?
It's always amazing that the elders will tell you, you're doing a great job being single. And, you know, they've encouraged me to stay single, and they've encouraged me to look at it as more of a privilege. What's interesting, though, is that you have these elders telling you these things, and they're encouraging you to stay single. And they'll tell you things like, oh, your mate may not be here. You may find a mate in the new system. But I always try to put myself in other people's shoes, because if you have an elder who's married, who's been married for a number of years, who has his family, so his emotional needs are being met, but then he's counseling a single person, and I was basically pouring my heart out to the elder, telling him, you know, how hard it is to try to stay firm in the truth and to be single. And he's encouraging me to be single, but yet he's telling me, keep doing this. You're going to stay single for the rest of your life, but keep faith, because you're going to have a mate in the resurrection or in the paradise, which I pretty much found that to be almost insulting, because you're going through this life. You have these emotions and you have these desires, and it's not always about sex. It's about companionship. And it's about having somebody on your side who's supporting you that you can share your life with. And I look at all these missed opportunities, and I have two elders in my home that are both married, so their desires and their needs are being met, and they're telling me to have faith. You know, you may live your whole life and be single, but have faith, because you'll get a husband in the end. And it wasn't always about having a husband. It was just about fulfilling that part of your life, that chapter in your life. You know, and we're all put on this earth to make that choice, whether we want to stay single or if we want to be married. And I had that desire in my heart to be married, to be in a relationship. I didn't want to be told that you have to set those feelings aside and put your all, pour your heart into the truth, auxiliary pioneer. And they would encourage me like, oh, you have all this free time. Why don't you go serve where their need is great? Why don't you volunteer up at Bethel? Because I'm also a nurse. So at the time, they were telling me that there is a need for nurses in Bethel. So take vacation time and go spend it up there, so that you don't have to sit here and pine away with these feelings and desires of wanting to be, wanting to have somebody to share my life with.
So do more Watchtower stuff.
Exactly.
Well, did you happen to meet any other men that were not Jehovah's Witnesses that you would have, maybe have gotten into a relationship with?
Yes, I did meet men along the way. You want the experience of having been on a date, having some, being able to have that as an experience in your life. So I did date a few people. Of course, it didn't progress because, I had this guilt that I was doing the wrong thing, even though none of the witnesses knew.
Okay, so you were feeling guilty about dating someone that was not a Jehovah's Witness. So did you feel chemistry with these men?
Some, yes. Some I did, but I let my spiritual mindset and everything that you learn in the Kingdom Hall, everything that gets pounded into your brain, you get indoctrinated with this information that doesn't escape you. And I've been learning a lot that, as Jehovah's Witnesses coming out of the truth, you have to reset your thinking. And I didn't realize how much the society had controlled every single decision that I made in my life. And it was hard to get past that. And the major thing is the guilt that you feel. And even though nobody sees what you're doing, they always tell you that Jehovah's watching. But I was more afraid of running into somebody at my Kingdom Hall while I was on a date. Even though I knew Jehovah God saw what I was doing, but I had more fear of man, elders, people in my congregation finding out and possibly writing me out. And that's just twisted because my fear should have came from Jehovah and it shouldn't have come from man. But you just get so fearful that somebody's going to find out what you're doing, even though it's a normal part of life to go out on dates. But because that person was not a Jehovah's Witness, I just felt that incredible sense of guilt and fear.
It's like you're being censored.
Correct. And I think that mind control, that's a big piece of it. And that's why when I became an active the first time, that's why I came back. Because it was that deep-seated guilt, and my thinking was still wired into the Watchtower when I became an active. And when you believe that the truth is the truth and you leave it, you feel so guilty. But at the place where I'm at now, I no longer believe that it's the truth. So to leave it, I don't feel like I'm leaving anything behind. And it takes a lot to change your mindset. But when you get to that point and when you start doing research and looking up information and finding out that this is not the truth, what you've been led to believe for so many years, what your family or your loved ones believe, and what they're giving up in their lives for something that is not the truth, but yet they won't listen to you when you try to tell them.
Now, let's talk about what led you to getting your journey out of this organization. What are the series of events that helped you to do that?
I think it was my singleness that pretty much led me to do my research and to look into things, because there was something unnatural feeling about the truth. Being single led me to do further research down the road and to find out why I wasn't feeling like I was a part of the congregation, and just about how there is like a distinct separation when it comes to family members and single people. And I couldn't understand why it couldn't be cohesive. If we're all brothers and sisters and we're all, on the same path to obtain everlasting life, to live in a paradise earth, we all want to do our part to help each other and support each other to get there. But it's like there's this line that gets drawn, and it's like the singles have to fend for themselves and the people that are married have to fend for themselves. And it's not to say that all halls are like that, but there is a distinction. At the point where I'm at today, I am in a relationship with somebody who's not a Jehovah's Witness. And the one thing I can say is that if you date a Jehovah's Witness, we're all told, don't date until you're ready to marry. So once you date a brother, it's like a time clock gets set. And you have to find out as much as you can about this person's spirituality, but then you can't date them for an extended period of time to get to know them. you have to, within the time that you meet, maybe by 4 months, maybe by 6 months, be engaged to be married, or at least talking about marriage. Because if you're not talking about marriage and if you date them too long, then that means that you really aren't dating them with the intent to get married. And so, there are a lot of friends that you see, they meet within a couple months. They're already talking about marriage. By the time a year is up, they're already married. And that did happen with my roommate. She met a brother, and she dated him, was engaged within 4 months. Within about 8 months, they were married. And then before the year was up, she was already pregnant with their child. And her life changed dramatically within a year. I don't see her that much, so I don't know where she's at as far as spiritually or, if she's happy in her marriage. But it just seems like that clock gets set, and if you're not married or engaged by a certain period of time, people are asking what's going on, how come you guys aren't moving forward to the next step. And when you date somebody in the world, people actually take the time to get to know each other. Things progress at a slower rate. You don't feel rushed. So you actually get to know the person that you're marrying versus in the organization. It's all about, let's hurry up and do this. It's almost like a business arrangement. Let's sit down. Let's talk about, how we're going to raise children. Let's talk about our finances. Let's talk about if we want to become pioneers. It's all of these conversations that get had, and they get had, or some people maybe don't even talk about it. But it's information that is just covered in a short period of time, and you don't really get to learn that much about the person unless you two are raised in the same kingdom hall as children.
And the thing is, when you think about that, you're only focusing on what they're doing for the Watchtower.
Correct.
Because I thought about that even in my own relationship. I was like, oh, God, we don't even know what each other's favorite color is. We never asked those kind of questions.
Yeah, and that's the way it is the majority of the time when brothers and sisters date. And then you've got, your other friends surrounding you saying, okay, well, you guys got to move forward with this. And the other thing is having the chaperone. You should always have a chaperone with you. It's funny because dating in your 30s and to have a chaperone, it seems awkward to me. I could see as a teenager if you're dating, or if you're in your 20s to have a chaperone. But it's almost like when you're in your 30s, your 40s, or 50s and you have a chaperone. It seems kind of comical to me, that whole idea.
Do you think that you and your boyfriend will get married?
I don't know. It may be a possibility. I mean, he doesn't live here. So it's like 3 hours away.
Okay.
But, you never know. I'm trying not to date with the goal of marriage. I mean, everybody wants to get married. Don't get me wrong. But I'm not putting that at the forefront to blind me in a way. Because I know when witnesses date, they date with that time limit that you have to be married by a certain time. So I'm letting things happen naturally, going with the flow. Yeah, I would like to get married. I mean, he's talked about marriage, but we haven't actually come together and say, yeah, let's get married kind of thing. We haven't had that.
But I'm going to say this. Just because the Jehovah's Witnesses have an expiration date on their dating doesn't mean that you want to be dating somebody and then you wake up and you've been somebody's common law wife. I'm just saying, you want to make sure that, like Steve Harvey talked about that, act like a lady, think like a man, and you ain't wanting to be somebody's, doormat either. I mean, you want to be legitimate at some point,
Yes. Yeah.
So, and I think a lot of women in the world find themselves in that situation where they want to get married, but they can't find anybody. And I think there's a lot of good Jehovah's Witness women out there that a man is looking for a woman with the qualities of a lot of the sisters in the congregations. And that's probably the reason why so many people, when they leave the organization, they find someone.
Yeah.
Where then you have people that's never been a witness and they don't have these qualities that a lot of the sisters have, and so they may not be marriage material. And everybody's not marriage material,
Yeah.
But
that's
a lot
true.
of the sisters are.
People, yeah. No, and it's just I was surprised how quickly I started dating once I decided to think out of the box. How quickly I found somebody that we established a relationship together.
The Jehovah's Witness culture is very interesting when it comes to dating and then being single. There's so many women out there that could no doubt tell the same story, and I'm sure they have even more horror stories to share with us and our listening audience about what it's like being single. So for those of you who are listening out here, listening to this program about being a single woman in the organization, be sure to send me your email at exjwct@gmail.com to share your story, because I know that there's a lot of you out there that have, other things that you'd like to share about being single. Now, Ronnie, you mentioned in correspondence to me that you became tired of family and others outside the organization that would allude that you were a closet homosexual because you weren't married.
Yeah, correct. And it wasn't only family. Like I said, there were others or outside the organization. I had coworkers, and I guess it's because you see the single person who probably has opportunities to date is not taking anybody up on those opportunities. And I did have one coworker who basically said, "You're just going to waste because you're not dating anybody." And, stuff like that hurts when you hear things like that, because I was trying to remain strong in the faith, and I was trying to look for somebody who was spiritually minded. And even though you can explain that to people, but they're of the mindset where be fruitful and multiply. Don't pass up opportunities, and I did pass up quite a few opportunities. And it's very hurtful to hear people think, well, if she's not with anybody, then she has to be a closet homosexual, and she just hasn't come out of the closet yet. And she's always hanging out with women. Anytime I see her, she's hanging out with women. She's going on vacation with women. She's posting pictures on Facebook. All there is women. So it was very hurtful to hear that. And, and it came from close family members, too. Some of them may have said it kidding around, but, I had cousins that were growing up, marrying, having their own families. I've watched kids in the Kingdom Hall grow up, and it's like I've been in the truth long enough to see all of that and observe all of it and observe family members and my brothers getting married and starting families. And then it gets to a point where you start thinking, well, what's wrong with you? Because if it's not the organization, then it has to be you. And that's the reason why you're not with anybody, because you almost start thinking that you're defective in a way. But yet there's all these other single people, single sisters out there as well. But when I decided that I was going to leave the organization, I did look outside, obviously, to date somebody. And it was within a matter of months before I started dating. And, it almost confirmed to me that I wasn't an ugly duckling. I wasn't defective. There wasn't anything wrong with me. It was just the circle of friends that I was around, the organization that I was involved in, severely limits any opportunities for you to grow as a person, to grow as an individual where you can stand on your own 2 feet, that if the Watchtower organization were to crumble, you wouldn't be so much in need of it. You could be able to think on your own. You'd be able to find your own way.
True. Because you don't realize you can do things. You think that you have to do it only this one way. And then when you wake up and you realize, wait a minute, what am I doing? Then you realize, I had other alternative things I could have been doing with my life.
Yes.
Now, how did you meet your boyfriend that you're dating now?
I met him online. I did go to a website, and there's many, many, many single people out there and people in my age group that are looking for somebody. And, of course, we're all put on this earth to be fruitful and multiply, and we all have this innate desire. That's the one thing that I got tired of suppressing, is this desire that I had. I have this desire. Jehovah gave me this desire, and I want to go with it. I don't have a desire to be alone. I don't have a desire to not have a family. As a child, as a teenager, as an adult, or where I'm at today, I still have that desire. That desire never went away. And for me to suppress it so long, I was making myself miserable. And it comes to a point where you reach a crossroads where you have to do what makes you happy, because nobody else can do that for you. Nobody else can find that path. And if you know what makes you happy, go do it. By all means, go do it, because you're just going to end up unhappy. You're going to end up miserable, and you're going to end up seeing other opportunities that people have and living vicariously through their accomplishments and what they do, or sitting down in front of the TV and watching a character live the life that you would have wanted to live. And that leads to unhappiness. It leads to bitterness. It leads to discontentment, depression, anxiety. There are a number of friends that are depressed. There are a number of friends who are on medication for depression. And they say, it's the system. It's the system that has you down. They tell you when you come to the hall, you're supposed to attend the meeting, and then you feel refreshed when you leave. A lot of times I felt worse when I left. I didn't feel refreshed. There were times where I did feel refreshed, but I didn't feel it was that safe haven where you could go.
Right. So now all of this, you're looking at your life, you're getting older, your life is, passing you by and everything. Now, you mentioned to me that your father had given you a copy of Ray Franz's book. When you got the book, what did you do with it?
I put it in a box. I did not read it because at the time I was a gung-ho Jehovah's Witness. And he gave it to me, and he sat me down, and he said that he was very concerned about me. And he says, I want you to know what religion you're getting yourself involved in. And I'm like, nope. All the information I need to know, I learned in my Bible study. You don't have to tell me anything different. That information you're giving me, that's apostate information. No, I don't need to read it. So I was of that mindset. So everything he told me just went in one ear and out the other because there was no way he was going to break my faith. And so he gave me the book. I took the book, and I kept it. I kept the book because he sat me down. He had genuine concern for my life, for my health. You know, I'm his daughter. I'm his only daughter. So I said, okay, I'll take the book. If that will make you stop talking to me about this, I will take the book. And I put it away, and it sat in a box for a very long time.
How long would you say it sat in the box?
Oh, for years. It sat in a box for years. I was already out on my own when he gave it to me. And this was around the time that I was pulling away from the family, so I wasn't really involved in family activities. So he saw this as kind of like a last-ditch resort to try to get me to see the truth for what it was. So when I was 29, when I got kind of discontented with the truth, discontented with myself, feeling very uneasy in my life. So when I became inactive, I did look at the book. I flipped through it. I didn't read it all the way through. So I saw a few things in there. I saw things about the United Nations. I saw other things just with the workings of how the society operated. I saw information about 1975, which I had thought was a rumor because I never looked into it. You hear these things. There's all these rumors milling around in Kingdom Halls. But at the time, I didn't own a computer. I didn't have access to the Internet. So I just started flipping through it a little bit. And I didn't have anything to back that information up. Even though I did see it in a book, I was like, but I need to see it for myself. Like he was quoting different Watchtower articles. And I kept saying to myself, I need to go to these Watchtower articles to see if that information is really in there. But I didn't have access to any of that stuff. And I didn't grow up in the truth, so it's not like my family had bound volumes of the old Watchtower and Awake articles that I could go see. So what ended up happening was I just glanced over it, and, you know, during my being inactive, I did have friends that were reaching out to me to try to get me to come back. So I was still feeling that guilt. I felt like I did leave the truth. I felt like I did leave Jehovah. So it was like something gets the better of you, and then you're like, okay, let me give this another try. Let me give it another shot. And I started to go back to the meetings. But I, again, at that point in time, did put the book away again. I didn't throw it away. And it wasn't till, I want to say, about 6 months ago that I decided to read it front to cover. And when I started reading it, I think I was at the point where I was like, okay, I need to find out if this organization is actually the truth. I need to find out if this information is apostasy, because I can't have that lingering in the back of my mind. So what I ended up doing was, because now I had access to the Internet, I had access to the Watchtower Library, I had access to other information on jw.org. So information that was in that book, I started comparing it. I started going to those actual Watchtower and Awake articles, and I started seeing the stuff for myself, which was very empowering. And I pretty much was trying to validate what Raymond Franz had put in the book. I wanted to validate that it was actually the truth, that he wasn't changing a few words here and there. But I validated that to myself, that information was coming from the Watchtower and Awake and Kingdom Ministries, and everything that he quoted, I tried to look up as much as I could. I didn't have access to a lot of the older things because I think it cuts off in the 1950s. But anything I could get a hold of, it started enlightening me. It started getting me out of this darkness I was feeling, and it validated why I was feeling that uneasiness, like that feeling you get when you know something isn't quite right, but you don't know exactly what it is. So it started to validate those feelings. And then, of course, I went to YouTube, and I was looking at a lot of other stuff where there's XJWs, and I also came across some of your videos, and then I did go to your website, and I looked at other videos that you had. And I didn't realize that there is so much information out there. And the amazing thing is that the Watchtower and the Awake, that the information to disprove that they're the truth is in their articles. That's the amazing thing. Like the belief for 1975, that information does exist. It is there. The Watchtower was encouraging people, telling them that the end is coming in 1975. For certainty, we know that 1975. And they even have, and what stuck out to me is that it says this information comes from God. not from us. So they were saying, we're not making this up. And what that does, that just makes people go into a frenzy because they believe everything that the Watchtower provides. Whatever the society and the organization is printing, they believe it, and they'll fight to believe it. Which is pretty sad, but it's right there. It's in their information. You can use their information to disprove their beliefs, which is amazing because you don't have to go to apostate information to disprove it. You don't have to go to these outside websites. All you have to do is do the research within the organization itself, and you'll see that it's not the truth.
And that's why the JW.org site is trying to, keep from publishing those older magazines because they know that the information in those articles are damning to them. And so I think, does it go back to like 2000? They've been cutting it off, And if you have the Watchtower on CD, if you have the Watchtower on CD, which I have, I can go up there and I can pull up some of the old articles in the bound volumes and stuff, A lot of people that's listening to this program right now, if you're lurking, and I keep saying that because there's so many people like Ronnie that, she's sitting on this gold mine of information, this book by Ray Franz, not realizing that it's the key to her freedom. And then you're probably kicking yourself thinking, man, I wish I'd have read this book sooner because I could have got from off and under all of this guilt a long time ago. And so it's just one of those things that, you just have to fight, through it and everything. So for people that are lurking and listening to this program, don't wait a long time to go do your research. And I think that's the really bad thing is that Jehovah's Witnesses do not allow you to read other people's literature.
Exactly.
Stay tuned to part 2 of Ronnie C's story as she discusses how she was accused of being an apostate.
If you've been in the struggle and want to appear as a guest on our show, email us at exjwct@gmail.com. The views and opinions of our guests do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Critical Thinkers.